Hey, reader, welcome back to the channel. This is Centaur here, and today we are talking about the Jumbo Sherman tank. This is the big, heavy tank present for the Americans, smaller than the Pershing, mind you. I think in its final iterations, because of course the Pershing basically comes out right at the end of the war. But this is the bigger version of the M4 Sherman. It has a full damage value of 10. It is very expensive. This thing is, 250 plus points in order to run. And so the result is a lot of people, especially in the competitive scene, will just pass over this thing. Okay. Uh, they'll say, I can get two armored vehicles for the same cost that will be arguably more effective. They will do more for me in my army. And so they pass over it. And so continuing in what is apparently a really popular series, you guys really like this. The algorithm is telling me to keep making more of these. And y'all loaded me up with like 50 requests. So, here we are. Uh, so apparently you want to play a Jumbo Sherman, and that's where we're going today. Before we begin, because this has come up now twice, once well, actually quite a bit under the Tiger video, and then again under the KV one. I'm going to take a brief moment. I'm not going to do this before every single video in this series, but I want to take a quick stroll through the Zern school of thought regarding bolt action, because there are 6 principles when I build a list, as I was collating it and thinking through it, that I tend to follow. And if you don't fundamentally agree with that mindset, you're going to be honked off by the list I'm giving. Okay. So in fairness, I'm going to let you know what my design philosophy is. If you disagree, that's totally fine. Please let us know down below. It helps the algorithm. And a lot of people have been finding my channel because of your comments. So thank you. Positive or negative, thank you very much for what you're doing. But I do think it will help to remove some of the cognitive dissonance, because I know that different people play different ways with different other people, and maybe it'll be helpful just to see this. I might even make a whole separate video on list building and my school of thought for list building, to add to the beginner tutorial series. That maybe that's useful. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if you think it would be nice to have an expanded video talking through it as we walk through building out a list from scratch, and we'll go from there. But then we're going to jump into what we normally do. We'll talk about why the Jumbo Sherman is rarely run, what they offer you, and thus the reason why I'm willing to consider it for this series. And then we'll take a look at my recommended army list, the most controversial part of the video. And then we'll look at what the list is designed to do, why I built it the way I did. And then we're going to walk through all of the main scenarios from the book. We're going to look through all 6 of them, and we're going to see how would you go about trying to win that scenario. And this is, opponent agnostic. It's not like you have to be facing a thematic army of Germans from the late war period. It's not like you have to be facing a specific style of opponent. The only rule is the opponent has to have 1,000 points maximum. Beyond that, they can run whatever they like, and I think that this list stands a fighting chance to win. I don't think it's a shoe-in every single time, because player skill is involved, board layout is involved. There's a lot of different things that'll come into it. If you find that you're playing on an island hopping board where the lack of amphibious vehicles is going to mean your vehicles are going to be stuck on specific sections of the board, some of the strategy is going to fall apart. Okay. But in as much as, everything is relatively normal and standard for bolt action, each of these will be given a fighting chance from this list. And then we'll talk about thoughts on 1250 lists and how you can expand on it in order to improve it and make it even more effective. So starting first with my school of thought, there are 6 principles as I sat down in my basement studio, taking a look at list building and how I went about it, that help to define this. So first of all, starting with order dice, because it's one of the first litmus tests I look at other than, am I still within the points limit? I think you need at least 15 at 1,000 points in order to be competitive. And what I mean by competitive is when you want to get the first draw of the turn, you have a reasonable chance of getting it. Now, we're going to be doing a video talking about how much is too many, how much is too few based on math, and how adding extra order dice might not actually increase your chances of getting the first activation or critical activation when you need it, but it is tanking the effectiveness or the resilience or the mobility of your units in exchange. And there comes a point where it reaches too much of a tipping point, right? Where it's just not effective enough. I think 17 tends to be a better number at 1,000 points. And when you're looking at 1250, you want basically those numbers plus 3. So you want at least 18 There are a couple of specific builds that can get away with 16 or 17 because they have a lot of multi-shot weapons. And so, because they're splitting fire, they're pinning down more enemy units. They're causing more enemy units to go down. So they artificially reduce the number of effective order dice that the opponent has. But that's just like a thing that may play into it. But I think, if you want to make sure you're getting that first draw, 20 is kind of better at 1250. Okay. Pins. And this is the thing that, especially as we're looking at heavy tanks that have the option of being taken veteran to ignore certain types of pins. A critical thing in my mindset is if I'm building a competitive list, 9 times out of 10, it's going to have a company commander in it. And so if you're getting that +4 or +5 morale bubble, and you know that you're going to need that near a critical asset that they're going to try to lock down, managing pins instead of removing pins is fine. It does mean that anti-tank gun might be firing on 4s instead of 3s. That is true. However, if my opponent expected me to rally on a given turn, aka automatic miss, taking a shot on 4s is better than they expected me to do on a given turn, right? And so, even though it might be slightly less effective, it does still mean it could be worthwhile to do, right? Especially if we're going after something that has an objective, is claiming an objective, and by clearing out that unit, taking the chance on clearing it, and then early on in the next round, declaring a rally if they really start stacking the pins is perfectly satisfactory. Okay. Managing your pins. It is okay if certain units are attracting fire, as long as the rest of the army is utilizing and doing their work. It doesn't matter. And you're going to see this down below, even if the Jumbo Sherman, which newsflash, is not being taken veteran. Okay. As long as the Sherman is still able to do its job, which in some cases is just tanking and taking a beating for other units, that is a perfectly acceptable thing. And to take it veteran actually actively hurts the list because the opponent now says, well, I'm not going to do much to that thing. I am not even going to pin it. So I'm going to go after other stuff. And the other stuff is stuff we don't want them to go after. So just know evading pins can help. We saw that in the KV1 video. KV1s do it really well because of Armored All Around. And they're completely ignoring pins from whole sleuths of weapons in the game, even at point blank range. Other, especially DV10 vehicles, do not have that luxury. And so you'll find a lot of those I'm recommending that you take regular because I believe in managing pins, not necessarily evading them. Okay? If you disagree on that, I perfectly understand. It is really nice when you can walk into a scenario feeling like you're not going to suffer more than 2 or 3 pins on a given turn. Just know that I fundamentally don't find that to be my guiding philosophy. I find it to be nice when it happens, but it's not something I'm willing to shell out for. And then next, mobility matters. Every list must have at least one swift infantry unit, aka a motorcycle unit, a cavalry unit, maybe bicycles. I'm not personally a big fan of bicycles, but I understand why people do bicycles. And especially if you know that there are going to be roads on the maps you play on. Every board I design for an event has roads on it. 100%. At every tournament I have been to, I have never seen a 100% road presence on every single board. So just know you're not guaranteed to get roads. So that's why I don't personally believe in bicycles. Okay. But I believe you need to have at least one of those or at least one transport in every single force, because there are times where you're going to need to move fast and get stuff somewhere. And more than that, get there before your opponent gets the chance to deploy an order dice. And if that's the case, you need to have at least one. 2 to 3 is actually better. Okay. Is kind of what we want. But in most cases, you need to have at least one. So that is going to put a restriction on how we build our list. Pin and damage potential is important. Some people will say all you need to be able to do is pin because pins means wins, right? And I'll be honest, in second edition, pins meant wins because every single pin, even if you did activate, was a -1 to hit, right? So the only units that could afford to stack up pins and still feel okay were typically veteran assault only units that knew they were going to be near a higher level officer. Those were the only units who didn't really care about pins because they were still pretty likely to pass tests, which means that they would go ahead and do their assaults. Pins don't matter in assault, so they'd still be able to do their job. Okay? And then eventually they would rally because eventually they start getting shot up enough that it makes sense that they may not necessarily pass. They get to that 6 and under, and then it becomes chancy and dicey as to whether or not you pass. As somebody who runs Polish cavalry in second edition, I came from that perspective. Pins mattered kind of most of the time. If I could pin the enemy down and then I could run them over, it worked out okay. And if they tried to pin down my guys, it might actually not be that bad. In third edition, pins kind of matter, depending on the enemy's morale bubbles. And especially if they have company commanders, and we always assume competence on this channel for our opponent, which means I walk into every game assuming there's a company commander on the other side, taking an experience for 41 to 42 points, because it's really cheap to get a really forgiving order test and morale test bubble area. Okay? It's very forgiving. You can make a lot of mistakes and not lose units. And so because of that, I think, yes, you need to have the ability to pin down the enemy. So that way you're forcing them to rally. Maybe they fail an order test. They don't fire when they should have. They go down when they should be activating and doing something else. But we also have to have a plan for actually removing enemy units. And so, while yes, you can technically run Americans just HMG heavy, I think one of the reasons that you'll soon discover why we're running a Jumbo Sherman is because Jumbo Shermans can do removal. Okay, they can punch really hard, and that is quite effective. Okay, strategy. You have the list has to have a viable plan for all scenarios, whether those are all the ones that are in the event pack, so you know them in advance, or on a random roll. There's a friend of mine who loves to run some really cool, very interesting thematic lists. Recently, he took a like inexperienced Soviet horde with, I kid you not, like over 30 order dice. It was like 42 order dice or something like that at like 1,025 points, which is awesome. Okay. And unsurprisingly, he won one of his missions because he had 42 order dice. It was really hard to stop him. But there were also two scenarios where the primary or secondary objectives were kill points. And so, unsurprisingly, he did win a scenario, but he didn't come in the top 5 people at the event. And if I'm looking at that list, I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be awesome. It's going to be fun to run. It's going to be cool pushing like over 100 models across the table. However, it's probably going to struggle on 2 of those 3 missions, because 2 of them are going to say all they got to do is rack up 5, 6, 7 of these units, and they might actually be okay for the rest of the game, ironically. And so because of that, whenever we're building a list, we have to build it within the context of these 6 scenarios from the book. More, of course, if you throw in things like the Commander's Compendium, the Zern Mission Pack, right, which you see over there. There's a bunch of different things that you have to consider, and the list has to have a viable plan for all of them. And then finally, sportsmanship. You will never see one of these lists lean into shenanigans. Now, to be clear, shenanigan doesn't mean you take more than one of something. That's not shenanigan. Overwhelmingly in human history, especially in World War II, units were not fielded in groups of 1. Okay? And so while I understand people's reticence and concerns about 3rd edition, and so do I don't want to be the guy. I will never build you a list that runs 9 multiple rocket launchers in an artillery battery and an armored platoon. It will not happen, because that's shenanigans, and we will not lean into shenanigans. I have shenaned once. I probably will shenan again. However, we are not going to be promoting those in the list we're pumping out to you on this channel. Okay? So we're not doing that. Okay? You will see probably at most 2, maybe 3 of anything in any list that I end up running. And the reason why is because, 1, traditionally, that is how it was done. 2, they tend to be pretty effective that way. And 3, I don't think 2 or 3 of something is particularly oppressive. Of anything is particularly oppressive. There are ways to deal with it. It might require a learning curve. It might require some really deep soul searching to find what it is in your army list that can make it happen. But I do think it's possible. And so with that extremely long tangent out of the way, let's talk about just Sherman. So first of all, why not? Okay, what's the problem here? First of all, it is a huge investment. It could be easily 260 to 300 points regular. Over 350 points potentially taken veteran. And that is a lot of points. That is close to, a quarter to a third of your army at a 1,000 point force. It could be more than that, right? Depending on which upgrades you take and stuff like that, which is a lot. If it misses on a given turn or it fails an order test, you are down-handed for the turn by a lot. Okay. The second is, it is extremely hard to make back that investment. Again, similar to what we've seen with the KV-1 and the Tiger so far in this series, the medium AT gun, which is the bare minimum you get at the 260. If you want the heavy AT gun, you're looking at those higher end numbers of like 300 to 350 points. Okay. it is fine if it hits, right? You do get a coaxial machine gun, so if you need to go after infantry, you do have a tool there. You also have a forward-facing machine gun, but that's it. And you can pintle mount that heavy machine gun that you see over there on the model to the right. That is fine. 260 to 350 points worth of value is really hard to make back with that. Okay, unless you can get up to another really big tank, hit it in the rear, which is extremely difficult to do for reasons we're about to discuss next, and then you're in the game at that point from a removal perspective. Okay, the problem, of course, with that whole thinking is it's slow, so it's only moving 6 to 12 inches on a given turn, and it doesn't get doubled movement on roads. So you are crawling forward with this thing. It was very heavy. The engine was not designed, I think, to carry this much weight, and so it is not a particularly fast vehicle. Okay. Often comes with very low order dice. Again, at 1,000 points, when a quarter to a third of your points is summed up in one order dice, and you have to take a second armored vehicle in order to run this thing because armor platoon rules, you are easily looking at 40 to 50% of your list being just 2 order dice in one platoon. And that does not bode well for the rest of the list, right? And so a lot of people, they're going to struggle. They're going to say it's going to have a really low order dice count. It is not going to be particularly high on the count. And so getting to 15, which as I mentioned earlier is my minimum that I recommend, is going to be very difficult to do with this. It also means that in order to field that many units, you're typically having to sacrifice supporting fire elements. So you're not going to have a lot of extra pins coming down range to pin things down that can mess with you. So you're going to have to carry the whole load yourself. You're going to be cutting down on infantry quality. You might be running inexperienced or regular troops instead of veterans. Or you may have to cut out entire things like air defense. And now suddenly, if somebody runs a quadruple air observer list, which has been done before, you can be in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. Okay. And so we're going to break all of these. We're going to show you a way to overcome, at least in part, all of these with a perfectly third edition viable list. No caveats, no special or, special rules or anything like that to come into it. It's just straight V3 in order to build this. So first of all, what does it offer us? It gives us a medium AT gun. And while you can technically buy the heavy AT gun, and for some people, they really like that, in my experience, a medium AT gun is perfectly viable against most armor you're going to see. The overwhelming majority of armor is going to be damage value 7 or 8, the occasional damage value 9, and then there will be those happy few, band of brothers sort of people who will show up with a DV10 or DV11 tank. Okay? A medium AT gun is perfectly serviceable against all of those. It might be leaning more into pinning down those larger vehicles until it can get around them. But in general, it is perfectly serviceable at handling all of those. So in my opinion, we're not going to upgrade to the 76 millimeter gun. We're going to keep the 75 millimeter gun. Okay. Second, it has 2 machine guns or a machine gun and a 2-inch HE template, and you have an option for the third with the HMG if you want it, which means you can pretty easily remove small infantry teams, right? The 2 to 3 man teams are very, very vulnerable to these. And with big squads, you can at least pin them down, if not actually deal wounds to them, especially if you decide to swivel around that HE template, right? Against small 1 or 2 man squads, the HE template's kind of wasted because they're probably going to go down. So you're only going to do like 1 hit, and then they're going to get a save after that. So that's not particularly great. But if you're firing anywhere from, 3, 6, potentially even 9 shots, and the top one being a heavy machine gun, so that's +1 to wound on a third of those, I mean, you can mess up infantry quite easily with this thing. At damage value 10, it is a likely survivor of a match. It actually requires quite a bit of work, especially if people are playing on meta and they're running AT rifles, light and heavy autocannons, maybe some light AT guns. They have to work pretty darn hard or get really, really close to your medium AT gun in order to even damage you reliably, let alone actually take you out of the fight. You are going to shrug off a lot of damage from cheap AT weapons, okay? Remember, autocannons and AT rifles at point blank range to the rear, which is the best they can do, is glance on 5s. Nothing on 4s beyond their 1 pin, right? And with heavy machine guns, which are the easiest ones to spam, you can get a ton of those. That 6 is to glance at the point blank range to the rear. That is not easy to do, right? And so a lot of the time, sure, they may do a pin or 2 to you, but in general, they're not actually going to do very much. right? Company commander's going to be there to keep you activating, keep you doing your stuff. And if you really desperately need to, because you've attracted 7 or 8 pins, you can always rally, get rid of all of them, and reset the clock for all that the opponent did because they shot so many things at your tank for effectively nothing, right? Which is to say, this is a centerpiece model. We're going to be able to build everything around this because it can chop through infantry. It can chop through armor. And so now we just build the rest of it to take care of this guy. And that's what the list is going to be. And so here we are leading off. We've got our list. In the high command area, we have our company commander with a pistol, taken inexperienced, just the way I like it, at 41 points. We're also taking a chaplain with Rangers lead the way at veteran. So he's only 34 points. He's wounded on 5, so even though he's a one-man squad, he's not particularly easy to get rid of, especially in heavy cover, especially since he's the kind of unit you can really just order down to, right? He doesn't have a weapon. He's not shooting. You can't assault with him. He keeps going with it, right? So, we've got some options there, but most importantly, he can also keep up with our other Rangers unit because he gets that free move at the beginning of the game. And then in our rifle platoon, we have a platoon commander with an extra man with pistols, taken in experience, only 26 points, not bad. We have our 7 Rangers with the BAR. This is the loadout I like for Rangers. I know a lot of people really like just buying 6 Rangers. They take them all with rifles. They get 2 free shots, and that's great, and I'm going to let you finish. I pay an extra 20 points to add an extra 2 shots, plus an extra wound to the squad. I tend to find it means, and you can see this in the BAR's video that we ended up doing, it means you're going to keep that volume of fire going a little bit longer. You're one step ahead of everybody else for maintaining volume, which is really nice. It gives you 10 shots, which for my math is actually really important. The number 10 is really important. The number 12 is also really important. Number 8 is fine if you think you're going to be hitting on 4s. It's less fine if you're hitting on 5s, which can happen with Americans, especially Ranger squads. So toward that end, I tend to find I like the 7 Rangers with the BAR. Other people like 6. Totally cool either way. I don't disagree with you either way. We got 4 military police, U.S. Army military police with 4 pistols taken in experience at only 32 points. Those will come in very handy later. We've got 2 5-man glider machine gun squads taken regular. So this is an LMG and 3 rifles. So the 3 rifles proc you an extra attack. That's 8 shots at 65 points. That's less than 10 points per shot, which is fantastic. And half of those shots have a 36-inch range, which is really great. We then got a light mortar team, 3-man taking an experience at 25 points, which the Americans can do, which is pretty cool. And then we've got ourselves our 3/4 ton truck. This is our 8-man capacity inexperienced truck. Believe it or not, we're going to get a lot of work out of this thing. I know a lot of people say soft skin transports don't work anymore. I think soft skin transports work once, and as long as they get their people out before anything else happens, they're fine. And we're going to get a lot of work out of that. We've also got a Jeep, more on him a little bit later too. And then going into the armor platoon, we got some funky stuff going on. So we've got our reconnaissance Jeep with a heavy machine gun and the command vehicle special rule as our commander. The reason why the jumbo heavy assault tank is not the command vehicle is because if he is, he's a platoon commander, which means we can't snap to him. And I want to be able to snap him with the company commander. So toward that end, he's just an extra bro helping out, okay? You see, we've taken him regular. We haven't put any other upgrades on him. He doesn't have the extra HMG. He does not have the heavy AT gun. He's taken stock standard, and I actually really like that build. I think it's really good. And then we're escorting these with 3 M13 MGMCs. These are 6-shot HMGs because it's a double HMG setup, completely on a 360-degree turret. It is damage value 7. It is open-topped. That is relatively fragile, but 1, you'd be surprised how survivable these things are. 2, that is 6 shots at 48 inches with +1 to wound and a confirm in the errata that even at long range, when they would technically drop to pen +0, they still pin armor. That's still a thing. And so here we have a very reliable set of pin generators, infantry meat choppers, and also each of them does 12 shots against aircraft. So if people do run from an air defense perspective, that is 36 shots, which means even if they all have pins, on average, you are taking down a flying fortress over 50% of the time. And you're taking down normal aircraft closer to 80% of the time, which is really great. And again, if they don't have pins on them, you can even afford to lose one of these, and the odds are still in your favor at the same rates that you're going to take down even flying fortresses, which is really good. Keep in mind, by the way, the reconnaissance Jeep does have the recce rule, so he is a little more survivable than your average V6. And so the result is 15 order dice, which is the bare minimum that I will do. 2 points left over at 1,000 points, so you can shuffle those around if you want to. You could, for example, remove the pistols on the platoon commander and the extra man. So that way they have a little more reaching out distance for pinning people. In an ideal world with the way we're running these, they will never use that. And so because of that, I'm less concerned about that, but you could hypothetically do that. Similarly, you could change out some of the pistols for rifles on the military police squad if you wanted the military police squad to be able to provide some long range pinning potential. These are possibilities. I leave it open for you for whatever you may want to do. So what should this do? First of all, from a vehicle hunting perspective, not just pinning perspective, but hunting perspective, the Jumbo Sherman tackles the big armor after they've already been pinned by the MGMCs. So that way the chance of return fire is pretty minimal. If they don't have really big armor, that's fantastic. We're pinning down some and removing others with the big gun. Okay. We've then got our light mortar and our infantry and our Jeep to harass people. We've got the company commander ensuring that our orders are actually going off. And so the result is that we're able to kind of keep people away from our main assets as we're working down enemy armor. If they rely more heavily on infantry and we need to go infantry hunting, the infantry and the Jeep alongside the machine gun motor carriages are able to hunt down enemy infantry pretty effectively. I mean, you're getting 3 to 6 shots from the vehicles, all with +1 to wound, even at 48 inches. They're pretty effective at trying to get through and chop into things. You also have an option to kind of move infantry in the truck. So if you wanted, for example, your machine gun squad, one of your machine gun squads, to get better positioning to get to infantry, you can always drop them in the 8-man truck, have the 8-man truck move up, say, with the platoon commander. Depending on how you run it, you could even throw in the chaplain if you really wanted to. I tend to think the chaplain should stay closer to your armored vehicles. But if you wanted to, you could technically do that. And then they just hop on out. Platoon commander could even issue an order to both the truck and the machine gun team, so that way everybody's jumping out all at once before your enemy really has a chance to interrupt, unless they went heavy on ambush, in which case you'll know that before you decide to do this. And then they're able to get better angles to even avoid some walls or other forms of cover that the enemy might have been planning on. We've got, for dealing with campers, we do have a light mortar, right? He's going to encourage enemy movement. Really, we're working with infantry and armor pushing up and shooting down, pinning them down, causing them to either continually go down, in which case they aren't running away from you, so you're able to close distance with them to the point where going down doesn't help, or you force them to move away because they're like, man, I just can't take a beating from all of these +1 to wounds. They're going to have, we're going to need to surrender this location. And then with morale bubbles, we don't have as many as I normally have. Typically, I run 3 platoons, maybe even 4. In some of these videos, you'll see up to 4. But in this one, I could only fit 2. And that's okay, because I think we're still going to get what we have, because that means we have 2 platoon commanders and a company commander, which means that as long as the company commander is always staying near the Jumbo Sherman and the machine gun motor carriages, we're going to be okay. And then the platoon commander just stays near the rest of the infantry to make sure the supporting fire continues coming. And so now looking at Seek and Destroy, which you might tell yourself looking at this list, okay, he's got a bunch of one-man and, inexperienced officers. He's got a chaplain. He's got some DV6 and DV7 vehicles. It doesn't look very hot for him. I disagree. I think that the Jumbo Sherman dueling enemy armor, especially with the knowledge he's got a chaplain removing a pin from him every single turn on a 3+ to help him out, which could come before he activates. It could be that he activates, the enemy tries to retaliate and shoot at him, and we start removing some pins off of him just to continue keeping him on the field. But I think he can remove 1 or 2 pieces, and I think he survives. I don't think he's actually removed on average. You then have your 3 M13 MGMCs. They're going to be hunting enemy infantry. I'm going to conservatively say they're going to remove 4 enemy units, especially infantry, and you're going to lose 2 of them. You might not lose 2 of the 3. But I'm going to go conservative, and I'm going to say you lose 2, okay? We're going to assume the worst because, again, we're assuming competence from our opponent, and they should be going after those. Infantry are going to declare fire orders in as much as they're not in danger of being retaliated against. We need to keep bodies on the field. More commonly, we're going to be giving them the ambush order. And the reason why is because if we feel in danger of losing an order dice, we can always go down. We have the ability to trigger and turn the rule to instead go from ambush. We can go to fire, obviously. That's mostly what ambush is for. But you can also just go down. So we can improve the survivability of our units. And this is important because platoon commanders and company commanders cannot go down while also calling snap 2. So if we want to snap 2 the men, we give those commanders an ambush order. Because then, if at the end of a turn, if the enemy is locked up and they're within point blank range of us, we can always shoot them with a pistol at the end of the day if we want to. But more reasonably, what we're actually probably going to do is we're saving that so if somebody does choose to shoot at us, we go down, ideally blocked by the armor to something like the torso or the head. So that way we're getting a 4+ heavy cover save becomes a 2+ heavy cover save. That's the ideal scenario. Okay. Oh, well, I guess the ideal scenario is you're completely out of line of sight. Nobody ever shoots at you for the entire game. That's kind of that's the chef's kiss for any commander. And I suspect actual commanders in the military would agree with this. In addition to that, obviously, you are durable enough with things like, say, the Ranger squad, and even to some extent with the machine gun team squad, because you really only need to keep around 3 out of those 5 models. You can take 1 or 2 punches to you and still be okay. So there is some margin for error, but in general, we only need these guys to be contributing a little, right? As long as the armor that we mentioned above does their job that we've mentioned here, we're up 5-4. Yeah, we're up 5-2, possibly 6-2, which is a win, okay? Because we only need to win by 2, right? And so the infantry don't technically need to do anything as long as they keep the enemy off of the MGMCs and the Sherman, okay? With the Jeep, if it's possible, assuming we're not playing against Bulgaria, Partisans, or the Hungarians, we're going to outflank the Jeep. And we're going to outflank the 3/4-ton truck. And the 3/4-ton truck is going to include the platoon commander and the machine gun infantry that we talked about earlier. These guys are going to harass the small teams, especially mortars and multiple rocket launchers, because they got that minimum range. So if we can simply drop off and start shooting at them, the next turn, they have to run away, both because they're in danger if they stay close. All of those weapons are fixed weapons, with the exception of like a small light mortar team. Though if they want to assault you, they can. I think you'll feel okay with all of these units if you're being assaulted by a light mortar team. All the others, they can't assault because they have a fixed property, right? They don't get to ignore those rules. Sans Japanese in the new Japanese book, they don't get multiple rocket launchers, but their heavy mortars technically can bonsai. So toward that end, for most people that you're playing against, they'll have to redeploy, which means they aren't shooting. They reset their ranging in. You are in really good shape to continue harassing these guys and just continually keep them on the run. And that means, I think, that assuming that you're able to kind of wreck you away from danger with Jeep in order to help keep it alive so that way you're not being hunted, out of the 4 units that you're sending over, I think that those 4 units, the Jeep, the truck, the infantry section, and the officer, together will remove 2 to 3 units. And I think, admittedly, you're going to lose like half of them. You're going to lose like 1 or 2 of those, okay? And then finally, the light mortar, critically, he's going to activate late. You're not even going to give him an order because obviously ambush doesn't really work with HE. It's not really how indirect fire works. But if he's targeted early on, you just go down. Keep him alive on table. 3 inexperienced units, even in cover, will not last very long, okay, from experience. But if by the end of the turn, if it doesn't look like he's going to be targeted by anything, if he's pretty safe, his side of the battlefield looks pretty good, you can declare a fire order with him and just headhunt at 6. And then early on in the next turn, if it looks like you're kind of doing well on that side, you could tap him a second time and now quickly go for 5s before your opponent has a chance to move that unit or do anything else with that unit or try to punch back at you. You could do that. But the nice thing about it is, as you can see here, the plan for winning the scenario does not require the light mortar to do anything at all. And as somebody who does not like light mortars, for me, that means I can include it in this list because I don't expect it to do anything, okay? And so, if the opportunity presents itself, feel free to take a shot. If you think you're going to get punched in the face, save it, wait for it. If they still haven't moved that unit, go after them late in the turn. But if you need to turn it to down instead and just order them to go down against an attack, you haven't lost anything. You're doing okay. Looking at key positions, now that we know that you at least stand a fighting chance to try to win in Seek and Destroy. In key positions, we know we're going to have somewhere between 5 and 7 objectives because it's D3 plus 4. That means there's going to be 3 to 4 objectives that you are going to be placing. You have to place them before you declare your board edge. So I am recommending, because you're going to roll off for board edges after, don't put 4 of them all on the same side. Put 3 of them near your side and put 1 of them smack dab on the center line, okay? Because then your opponent, who probably placed them all on their side, is going to say, okay, so it doesn't really matter which side I take. And that means you're probably going to get the side you put down, okay? It's way more likely because laziness principle when it comes to wargaming. I don't want to pack up all my stuff. You don't want to pack up all your stuff, so we're going to stay on the side we're staying on, okay? Rangers. Now that we know that there's going to be 3 to 4, but one of them's going to be near the center line, the Rangers and the Chaplain are going to move toward the central objective on turn 0 to stake them out, okay? We know from the errata that we always get to perform the Ranger lead the way rule, even if nobody starts on the table, which is really great. And then once we're there, I am recommending that you roll the Sherman onto that central objective as quickly as possible. That means very probably if you're not starting on the board, if you do have to start in first wave, it's going to be a run order on the first turn, possibly also on the second turn, but you might be able to advance on the second turn, provide some cover fire because the Rangers, I mean, it's a 7-man Ranger squad plus a veteran chaplain to help keep the pins off of them so that way they can stick around. They are not likely to run. Okay, as long as they are in heavy cover when they're staking out this objective, they are very likely to still be around by turn 3. And the trick is we then going to roll the Sherman onto that central objective, so that way they have to destroy the Sherman in order to claim it. It's the only way that they can do it. Okay, we're then going to claim the nearby objectives with glider infantry and the mortar. Okay, so we've got 2 glider squads, we've got the mortar squad that covers our 3. Okay, and then our supporting vehicles are going to harass. They're just going to winnow down the enemy, and with 4 vehicles all shooting between 3 and 6 shots with +1 to wound, we're going to be able to harass their vehicles, their armor, their infantry sections of various kinds, their artillery pieces, just to help kind of push them down and make sure that anything that's trying to get across our side of the board cannot, anything that's trying to get to the central objective cannot, and maybe even put some pressure on those back objectives so that way they have to guard them because all it takes is us moving some guys into a carrier jeep or an inexperienced light truck, and we might be able to zip on over there and claim the objective from them. So because of that, we're just going to winnow down and keep them down because we have the 4 we need. We don't need more than 4. We don't need to get greedy and try to take all of them, okay? It feels great when you can feel like you had total board superiority. It is not strictly necessary, and with this list, we are not doing that, okay? We're bunkering down, holding our own, holding the center, and keeping the enemy out of there. For top secret, this is one of the scenarios where moving first really matters. Okay, so first things first, the Rangers and the Chaplain are going to move up on turn 0. Okay, on turn 1, everybody else is going to provide cover fire for the Rangers. Okay, even if you're coming in from first wave, the Rangers have the ability to reach the central objective and pick it up as the first activation on turn 1. That is ideally what we're doing. And with 15 order dice, we don't have as good a chance of getting it as if we had 17 order dice, but it's a pretty decent chance. Okay, we have a fighting chance at getting it. And so that's what we're going to aim on. Okay, that's what we're planning around. Okay. Now, for everybody else, with the company commander helping to make sure that we continue working, the Ranger squad is going to run back. Now, you can technically board the inexperienced truck, and you can create a cage like we've done for all the other videos where your armored vehicles kind of move up to kind of screen and protect everything, providing that heavy cover safe for whatever's on the inside, and that would include the truck. You can do that. Just know that because of how Rangers work, you might actually be faster just running the Rangers, ironically, and then just using the truck as kind of a secondary line of really nice, long, soft cover. And if they want to blow up the truck, that's great. That's now impassable terrain, and it's now heavy cover against whatever you want to shoot at. And so, I mean, I think that's really good. And then what you can do is you can simply follow it up with other squads. So move the machine gun glider squads once you start getting closer to your side of the board, or the light mortar team over. So that way, when in doubt, if they do end up finishing off the Rangers, you have squads around that can pick it up instead. Okay. Chaplain is going to be keeping up with the Rangers just to help keep removing pins. Whoever the carrier is, if they have pins being thrown at them, the chaplain's job is to pull those off. If they don't focus on the carrier, you can remove pins on other stuff because good news, it means they didn't focus on the carrier. But we have the opportunity because of the special move of the Rangers, and this is why we have a Ranger squad in there. We have the ability to potentially get in there as early as first activation of turn 1, claim it, we've got it, and now we just need to keep moving the football back in our direction. Our strategy for demolition. It's a little bit shenanigan-y, but it's totally how outflanking works, okay? This is how we work. First of all, the Rangers and the Chaplain are going to move on turn 0 toward the enemy objective. We are not actually going to try to blow things up with the Ranger. As I read the rules for the Chaplain, I don't think the Chaplain can actually help because I don't think he's allowed to participate in things that would potentially score for this. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't count. So my assumption going into this is that the Chaplain cannot help. If I'm wrong, please let me know down in the comments below. But my assumption going into this is we're going to fight with at least one hand tied behind our back in this. Chaplain cannot help us blow up the base. So instead, what we're going to use is we're going to keep an officer, a machine gun team, the light truck with those two guys inside, and then we're going to keep our 3-man mortar team in the transport jeep. So we're going to have 5 units in reserve. We'll only have 10 units on the board for the beginning part of demolition. Okay. The Jumbo Sherman's job is to fire in advance toward the enemy objective. We are not castling. So while we mentioned castling in both of the other 2 videos, we are not castling here. And the reason why is because our boys that we're dropping in there to try to blow this thing up are going to need cover. And that cover means we need to be able to blow through stuff. And the Jumbo Sherman, the nice thing about it is you can send it right down the middle, straight at the enemy, and there's a reasonable chance he's actually going to live. Okay? Give him cover, obviously, but he's going to live. Then the machine gun motor carriages and the Jeep just begin chipping away the objective defenders. If other people are coming around toward your own objectives, obviously you can harass those guys, help to keep them off. Glider unit that's out there, as well as the Rangers are also going to help with that harassing of would-be scoring units to keep the enemy from getting across to your side. Pin them down, keep them on the other side. And then on turn 3, the Sherman, the machine gun motor carriages, supporting fire units, they're going to do the best they can of clearing the defenders for the enemy. If the enemy is able to sneak 1 unit in toward your base, that's fine. It's totally okay, okay? We don't need that. The critical thing is this. We want as much as we can pounding down against the enemy defenders to pin them down, cause them to go down, or remove them entirely. And the reason why is because near the end of turn 3, the outflanking vehicles are all going to advance. As long as we still have the military police guys in place, we're already ignoring the -1 you normally get for coming in from reserves. We're getting an extra +1 to come in. And all of these have officers on them, right? Well, the little Jeep doesn't, but the little Jeep is now rolling on a 9, which is not bad. The other one has an officer on it. They're rolling on an 11. Our inexperienced truck is coming in from reserve on an 11. And we are going to advance those vehicles, ideally on a road 24 inches, but it might only be 12 inches. And then everybody inside is just going to perform a run order, and we are going to run straight into that objective range. And we're going to be rolling, ideally, with the officer, the machine gun team, and the mortar team. And with 3 chances at a 4+, reasonable chance the base gets destroyed. This is why it's also okay if we let one guy through for the enemy. It means that they have a 50-50 chance of trying to blow up ours, okay? In an ideal world, they wouldn't get anybody in, but us having triple the chances that they have to try to get this to work, having played the scenario before, there is a chance they're not going to blow up the vehicle, or that they're not going to blow up our base with that 1 die roll. 3 chances from us, you might fail it, but there's a very good chance you won't, okay? And so this one, I think you stand a chance of winning. Hold until relieved, which is where we're, starting to come to the end of the objective scoring ones, and we'll move into, more maneuver ones after that. Remember that we have a rule in things like key positions in top secret, where they talk about infiltrators in top secret and say you can't be close to the objective. There is no such rule in this one, and I think that should probably be changed, in my humble opinion, but here we are. The Rangers can move within scoring range of this objective on turn 0. The enemy might also have some forward deploying units and some scout units in there. That's totally fine because, again, I built this Ranger squad to fight. This is 10 shots potentially at point blank range, which on average is going to be like 8 hits. And those 8 hits are going to do a good number of wounds with very minimal saves. Or, heck, you could throw all 7 of these guys into a close combat if you really needed to, just to clear them and stake claim as your objective if you really needed to. Okay, so the critical thing here is that the Rangers and the chaplain near them, just to help keep pins off, so that way they activate reliably, they are there to help make sure that we can clear and try to claim the objective as quickly as possible. We're then going to be running the Jumbo Sherman onto the objective as quickly as we possibly can, because that means they now have to remove the Sherman in order to win the game. The rest of the army literally just guards the Sherman and the Rangers for the entire game. Okay, the Sherman's going to fire or ambush or rally every single turn, depending on what the scenario is and what the setup is for the opponent tactically. The Rangers are literally just going to go down every single turn. That's their job, right? You can technically shoot if you get an opportunity if you want to shoot, but in reality, they're really just going to go down every single turn because they just need to survive. That's all they need, right? And the rest of the army just begins shredding through anybody who would try to get close enough to try to remove them or pin down anything that's trying to shoot at them from afar. And the result is, I think, you can win hold until relieved. And then finally with breakthrough, the Rangers and the chaplain are going to move up on turn 0, but here's the deal. They're not actually going to try to get off the board edge. That's a distraction. Okay. Once again, just like in demolition, this is a distraction. The opponent assumes your mobility, get to move up early on in the game unit is going to be one of the ones that's going to score because it's starting closer. We are not going to do that. Instead, the light truck is going to carry the light mortar team, the military police, and the platoon commander. Okay. They are going to start on the board as much as possible. We're in first wave. We are not saving these guys off. And then late turn one, the truck is going to run toward the enemy deployment zone edge. Pretty much as close as it can get, end in cover if you can't make it all the way because, zippy roads or whatever. But you are going to move as far as you can. And on a quarters map, even if you don't have a road, you can actually score. And if that's the case, don't wait until late turn one. Literally first order dice of the turn, score with 4 units. That will win. And then early in turn two, if you're still on the board, run the truck off. Okay? Get it out of there. Score 4 units. For the rest of the game, you don't have to score with any units, period. You can just shoot at the enemy. And don't let them get 3 units off. But here's the best thing. You remember how I told you that we had that little inexperienced Jeep with 3-man capacity that we did end up using for demolition, but we haven't really talked about all that much? This is actually the scenario reason why I decided to bring it. Because that's the kind of thing, you can have nobody in it. It's just 1 unit, right? And you can just have him hanging out near the back, la, 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 over near deployment zone. He's hanging out for the first turn. And near the end of the first one, you can run him further up toward the enemy line. And if they shoot at him, because he's relatively easy to remove, you haven't lost anybody inside, right? You've lost 1 unit that you didn't really have a plan for. It doesn't have any guns. It can't really do anything else. But now, if it runs off, it's worth 3 points because it's each of your own units. There's no penalty for it being a vehicle, right? And so they kind of have to focus it. They're going to focus the truck more if they have the chance to, but especially if you've already run off that light truck, you could then run off that thing. You're still working with 10 order dice on the table. You're still working with a lot of firepower that's chopping through enemy units, pinning down enemy units, keeping them from getting to your deployment zone. You can win this quite easily because the stuff that you're able to run off the board is trash. The only thing you might miss is the officer. And if you're playing in quarters, you might consider, if you think that there's a relatively easy way to get that 24-inch run in order to get off of that deployment zone edge, you might consider not putting the officer in the light truck, running off those 3 units, the mortar team, the military police, and the light truck, and then also running off the Jeep later, and that's your 4. And keeping the officer around just for the morale bubbles to keep your boys doing what they need to do. But the result is, because we've got firepower, we've got durability, we've got a lot of shots going down range, in a lot of cases with bonuses to the wounding roll to make them a little more reliable. This is winnable. You can do this. And if opportunity allows, you can technically advance the Rangers into the enemy deployment zone by the end of the game, which is an extra 1 point if you really want to. It is not strictly necessary. So I wouldn't say you absolutely have to, okay? But the goal, of course, behind most of that is literally just we're distracting, right? We're pulling thoughts away. Oh, they got to focus on the Rangers. Oh my God, they got to focus on all of these machine gun motor carriages that are rolling up. We've got this reconnaissance Jeep that's rolling up and shooting at people. There's all this stuff that's distracting. And meanwhile, you've got this light truck with a bunch of chaff that's either already run off the board, and that's really how we've won the match. We've got this little Jeep running around. They don't look nearly as important because none of them are going to be removing anything, right? And our opponent's probably going to know that. So that's how I would run it. I think there's a viable plan. Will it work? I don't know. Who are you playing against? What list are they bringing? Are there special rules from the event tied to every given scenario? Are they mixing and matching, right? Is it strictly the scenario that we have in front of us, or is there a secondary objective scoring? I don't know. But at least there's a plan for how to go about it. And most of the ways you score in most games are tied in some way, shape, or form to a bunch of the stuff that you've seen here. Okay? And so if I was upgrading this list to 1250, there's a couple things that I would do. I would add maybe about 100 points worth of heavy weapons platoon, call it 2 inexperienced machine gun teams and a platoon commander. And the reason why I would do that is, again, we want to add at least an extra 3 order dice. And that would be my 3 order dice right there. And now that leaves me over 150 points to either upgrade stuff that I have, bulk out other stuff, and it still gives me 3-man capacity stuff that I can load up into an 8-man truck. Right? Because I can still now run an officer plus 2 machine gun teams, basically the whole heavy weapons platoon inside of that light and experienced truck. And that now becomes our demolition unit. And then the light mortar team still exists with the Jeep. I can trade out the light mortar if I want to then, bulk up and do some other stuff with the list. Because again, we still have over 150 points left to go, right? And so that's quite advantageous. You can also upgrade the MGMCs if you want to. So you could upgrade to M3 Stewarts if you'd like. The M3 Stuart would give you the ability to be fully enclosed. It would give you damage value 8, though admittedly vulnerable. So from the sides and the rear, you're going to feel a lot like that MGMC. You don't get the flak unless you're putting that pintle mount on there, which in general I wouldn't do. But maybe if you're only replacing one of the MGMCs, you still got two 12-shot flak units, which is not bad at all, right? If you're really worried about flak, you can always pintle mount something on something like the Jumbo Sherman or the M3 Sword if you really want to. You could also go the route of the M8 Greyhound. More on that next week. We're taking a break from the So You Want to Play series. We're going back to the In Defensive series for a little bit because I have not abandoned that series. We are doing all the series this year. We're going to talk about the M8 Greyhound. I think a lot of people are sleeping on it. I think this is a really good option for adding some relatively cheap firepower. For everybody who complains about how much Americans have to pay for their stuff, I think it's because they're not looking at Greyhounds. And so we'll talk more about that, but you might consider paying an extra 20 to 50 points or so on top of the normal cost of an MGMC to upgrade them to an M8 Greyhound, and you might find that they work just as well, if not better. You've got the ability to upgrade the transport. So, I am a member of, and I think I'm the guy who coined the term, the Scout Car Squad. And I love the M3 Light Scout Car. It's my favorite transport in all of bolt action. And it's just a really cool car. Okay. It looks awesome. It looks dope. I didn't have enough points in this list to get it. It could be really nice to have one or two of those, both because it's another armored vehicle that has a forward-facing heavy machine gun. So we're sticking with our whole concept of we winnowed people down with +1 to wounds. You might even be able to replace one of your armored vehicles in order to get one of these or two of these. And if you want to help keep the cost down. The big thing about it is it would make it so you'd be a lot more durable with going in on stuff, right? It would give you a lot more options for sneaking in those demolition people because you'd go from an 8-man capacity soft skin transport to an 8-man capacity armored transport, and that ain't nothing, okay? And then finally, you can always add an air observer, right? I wasn't able to fit one in on this one because I needed the order dice, and I didn't have 110 points sitting around. I think in general, it is a good idea to run an air observer, especially since we're running a bunch of these regular, we're able to hold our own fire on 3s, which is not bad with those MGMCs. The second thing to think about the air observer is that, yes, while you may have a lot of flak and you're running a bunch of risk, like your opponent's also inviting a lot of risk. And if they think, he loaded up on anti-air defense, so he might even shoot down his own plane, they may not focus on your observer because you might be the one focusing on your observer, right? So they might prioritize other stuff, which means you have a better chance of getting those 2 shots off instead of just the 1. And so I think there's a lot of things to think about, a lot of things you could do with this list. And it could work. And part of the reason why it works is because we have a very durable, not easily removed medium AT gun in the list that can help stake objectives for us, help clear enemy armor, especially the on-meta armor choices. And it can do it pretty reasonably with a good complement around it. But what do you think? Well, first of all, obviously I went on too long about this, mostly because of the philosophy discussion at the beginning. But, I mean, was I being too generous to the list? Do you think it has glaring, obvious weaknesses that are easily exploited by your opponent? Do you think the fact that it doesn't have anything that can play, close range SMG related or anything like that is a problem? Let us know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.